Thank you so much for being here on this Sunday. This is our 5th art talk of in alignment with our current exhibition, Landscape of Desire. We have over 40 artists in this show, so in order to give you a chance to hear from each artist, what we've done is broken it up into Sundays so that we have a group of a sort of a panel discussion. So I'm really proud to present these 6 artists today. They each have their own unique interpretation of the theme of this show, which is Landscape of Desire. So the purpose of these talks is to give you, as the community, colleagues, fellow artists, collectors, a chance to hear from the artists about their inspiration, about their process, about their lives as artists. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a brief bio, and just to give you a sense of where they've come from and a little bit of their history. I'll try to be very brief so that they'll have more time to talk about their art, after which I have a series of questions that I'll ask, and each one will have a chance to answer it from their own perspective. We will have an opportunity to veer from the script. You guys, if you feel inspired to ask each other questions, totally fine. We'll talk for maybe an hour, and then we'll open it up for questions from you guys. Okay? So I'm going to actually stand behind each artist so that you know who I'm talking about. Okay. Let's see, who are we going to start with? Okay, let's start with Sally Veach. All right, Sally Veach's work is right here. Sally Veach is a painter based in Shenandoah County. She creates landscapes inspired by the sublime power of nature and humankind's place in the natural world. Sally presented a solo show at the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley, and she's a 2-time solo exhibitor at the Delaplane Art Center. Her work is held in the collections of the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley, the City of Alexandria, the County of Fairfax, the Hotel Heron in Alexandria, Virginia, and Veach currently maintains a studio at the Torpedo Factory in Old Town, Alexandria. Thank you for being here. All right, we're going to go next to Peggy Duvall. And Peggy's work is here, beautiful watercolors. Peggy is originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and studied drawing and painting at the University of Georgia before transitioning to interior design. Now based in Millwood, Virginia, Peggy designed her home to facilitate her painting passion alongside her career as an architectural design and building. Her diverse interests include landscape design and, at one time, operating a successful cut flower farm. She also maintained a local contemporary art gallery for 6 years. Peggy favors watercolor for its fluidity and spontaneity, particularly on heavy, bright white cotton paper, which she views as integral to her creative process. Her paintings aim to blend natural imperfections with intellectual depth, seeking beauty through control over artistic inconsistencies. Her work has been exhibited widely in the region and resides in numerous collections across the United States. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, we've got Lilla Ohrstrom. Her work is here, bronze figurative sculptures. There's some others peppered throughout the gallery as well. Lilla Ohrstrom is a mixed media artist residing in the Plains, Virginia, which is her hometown. Her first love is clay, from which she creates most of her work, including that which eventually is cast in bronze. Also a practicing art therapist, Lilla uses art as a way of helping herself and others navigate the complexities, beauty, and simplicity of this world. Her motto, art is life, life is an art. Thank you, Lilla, for being here. All right, we've got Linda L. Anderson. Her work is here, mixed media sculpture. Linda L. Anderson is a contemporary realist painter known for her innovative use of oils, acrylics, and mixed media. With over 35 years of professional exhibition experience, her work is held in collections across the U.S. and Europe. Inspired by woodland scenery and arboreal forms, Anderson integrates sculptural elements into her paintings, layering imagery, pigments, and mediums on paper, canvas, or wood. She earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Printmaking and a Master of Humanities from Wright State University, followed by a Master of Fine Art from Marywood University. Linda also completed graduate-level courses in psychology and art therapy, and she studied with noted landscape painter Peter Fiore. She has participated in prestigious exhibitions such as International Women's Day Centenary Global Arts Initiative Expedition and a solo exhibition at the Margaret W. and Joseph L. Fisher Gallery. Her upcoming exhibition at Veach's Gallery in July continues her exploration of nature-themed art. Linda's art studio is near George Washington National Forest in Front Royal, Virginia. Thank you, Linda, so much for being here. Okay, now we have the team of Beth Hall and Mark Cooley. So they also go by Spora Studios. Spora Studios is a family art collective consisting of Elizabeth Hall, Mark Cooley, and their daughter, Celia Cooley. Their works explore their interconnectedness. This is their work here, this video, and also the piece hanging horizontally. Their work explores the interconnectedness of human and environmental well-being in diverse contexts, including galleries, theaters, publications, gardens, forests, and farmers markets. Exhibitions of their individual and collective works include the International Forest Art Center in Darmstadt, Germany. Dankeschön. And the St. Louis Science Center, the Fado Performance Arts Center in Toronto, Canada, and the Institute of Contemporary Art in London, Media Lab Madrid, the Art Institute of Chicago, and many other locations. Mark and Elizabeth have been teaching art at the college level for over 25 years. They are currently professors at George Mason University, where Elizabeth teaches drawing, Mark teaches eco art, film, and media-related courses. Wow. Okay, thank you guys for being here. We've got an illustrious group. Great, so now we have some groundwork, baseline. I'm going to start by asking sort of a very straightforward question. So let's start with you. Tell us about your primary medium, why you chose it, how it speaks to you and why.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my primary medium is oils, painting, and sometimes I do drawing. So you just want to know about the primary medium right now?
Yeah, tell us about the mediums that you like to work with.
Yeah. Oil painting, basically. I worked in acrylics for about a year, but I just love the buttery feeling and the sort of, I don't know, there's nothing compares to working in oils. So also I love the, the saturation of color that you get, and I feel like I can control the color better in oils.
Okay, great. Thank you. Peggy, primarily watercolors?
Yes, primarily watercolor. I started out as a youth and through high school and college doing a lot of oil painting. My father was a painter, but my early adulthood, I moved a lot across the country and had to be very portable. And I left a lot of paintings behind every time I moved, and I hated that. So I shifted to watercolor for that practical reason, but then grew to love it. And every day I love it more, so, and hopefully getting better in exploring it.
Well, I love clay. I love a lot of different materials, and I do work in all kinds of media, but clay is my first love, and I got to work in clay when I was little, like 5 years old, and it was really then that I just thought I want to be an artist because this is what I like to do. But clay is very grounding, especially like earthen clay. And I work in all types of clay. Sometimes I'm working in oil-based clay, which I do because it's functional and it helps me get where I'm trying to go in terms of making a sculpture that might be cast in bronze. Sometimes oil-based clay is useful because you don't have to cover it up. It won't dry out. you can work on it for a long, extended period of time. But I don't actually love the experience of the oil-based clay like I do the water-based clay, that comes from the earth. It's recyclable, it can go back to the earth. It's very grounding, and I think that's what I really love about it, because I'm kind of a person who's I can kind of disappear, I can be more up in the sky, I'm a little head in the clouds. And so clay helps me be with the earth, and it's magical. It's a great material, and it does so many things.
Thank you.
Well, I would say that my primary medium, oil was the first painting media that I used. As I grew up as a child, I drew and I drew and I drew using all sorts of drawing media, and at age 10 I began painting. Oil painting was the first painting media that I used. And so I'd have to say that's probably my first love, but actually I have never met a physical art media that I don't enjoy using, and so I'm very exploratory, especially the older that I get. And I discovered, so I entered my BFA program as a painting major, and I took my first printmaking course, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it just took me a whole different direction. So I switched to painting, I switched to printmaking, which the painting instructor never forgave me for. And in that process, especially when I was working with lithography and doing it's called acid tinting, which it etches into. So lithography is planographic. So you're working with this massive limestone. It's about that thick, and it's meant to be planographic, and in that it's a flat surface. But you could do some acid tinting to kind of like pull back on the oil pigment that you have etched into the stone. And then I started seeing that the acid was pitting the stone, and I got really excited about that. Well, I have to say it took about 40 hours of planing it back down after the fact, but I'm like, wow, I really like working like dimensionally and sculpturally too. And it was just like, and the process went on. And so then when I was working on my master's of fine arts, I again intended to go into, because I entered Marywood University actually as a Master of Art Therapy student, took a full year of that. And while I loved it, my heart was like, you really want to get your MFA. And so I applied to the painting program. They only had 2 slots, so they didn't have room for me. So I had like 2 weeks to be matriculated. And I had decided after I completed my BFA, like, I'm done with printmaking, I want to go back to painting. So again, that kind of like first love type thing. And, but I had like literally like a couple weeks to get matriculated, so I had to make a decision. And so it was like, I went home that night when I found out I didn't get into the painting program, and I had a dream. And in this dream I was carrying around, it was like a long dream, and everywhere I went in this dream I had this big black portfolio. And when I woke up in the morning, like the light bulb went off, and it was like, you have all of those prints. Like, because I was like, I never thought that I'd keep going forward with printmaking. And so I contacted the printmaking professor, and I had never met him before, despite having now been at the university for all this time. And so I just contacted him out of the blue, but I'd taken the portfolio with me in the morning because that's what my dream told me to do. So I just asked him if I could come quickly show it to him. And he loved it. And he said, well, I'm full too, but I'm going to find a way. I'm going to get special permission to have you come in to the program. So I then was back into printmaking, and in that process I discovered ceramics. Again, that sculptural working, very tangible, because like other courses that you take, is part of your studio coursework. And so that kind of like, ultimately I came up with like, which I still am working on that series or expounding upon that series, it's called my Dimensional Landscapes, where I put painting together, I put the sculptural aspect together, and I build up textures. And recently, I've now taking the painting full three-dimensional, this is one of 3 examples of this. So I call this transformations of the landscape, which kind of fits in with this.
Definitely. All right, thank you.
I started out at my degree, BFAs in drawing, and basically it was just the easiest one to get to the finish line after having a false start as a music major. So drawing was like, I could put these courses in the summer. So in grad school I went to painting, and painting, the reason for that was I was already doing a lot of mixed media and stuff and interested in experimental film and things like that, but those programs weren't around, at least I didn't know about them. And so in grad school I went to painting because painting was the area that every art school has some area that you can do anything in and call it that. Sometimes it's sculpture, sometimes it's painting. So in there it's painting. You can do sculpture and painting. You can do whatever and call it painting, and you're just challenging the notion of painting then, or whatever it is. So painting was the thing, so I did that. And as that happened, my work was real autobiographical. It was very inward looking, cathartic. And at a certain point, I was exposed to other things through some professors, and I started to become more political and outward looking and less interested in regurgitating traumas and stuff. So I got into media at that point because a lot of what I was reading was sort of media criticism, things like that. And so I started working more with video and got more into the film, but this time with video and things like that. So when it came time to look for a job, I had a degree in painting, but I was doing all this media stuff, and I just hit it at the right moment where they were getting these computer art jobs were opening up, but they didn't really have anybody to fill them except for tech people. They didn't have anyone with art background. So whatever technical deficiencies I had an art background that made people that were hiring comfortable. So I got that kind of thing. But I went into teaching media at that point, completely away from, because before that I was teaching drawing and art appreciation and things like that. And so I've been with that ever since. At a certain point I got burnout, and Beth got me into gardening, and she was getting into plants and plant medicines and all sorts of things, generally healthier living. And so I got into really not wanting to. I got into gardening, really didn't like it, but it was a great escape from screen time. And eventually I got a permaculture design thing, and I teach eco art now, and so I try to balance what time I'm on the screen with. Now I'm still working with media, but I'm into documentaries. So my last documentary is with PBS now. I'm working on a new one. So that's what I'm kind of doing in my not really my own space, because Celia and Beth were good critics, I would say, in the development of the last one. So yeah, it's a team. It's always a team. So.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I started out as a painting drawing major, and then in grad school, although I had a love for, as many of you do, with oil painting, and chalk pastels. But in grad school, being in that environment with so many painters, it became so toxic that I developed bronchitis twice and pneumonia as well. So I kind of, from that trauma, you might say, I shifted more to mixed media. So using acrylics and using different processes of transferring images to the canvas, as well as moving to the computer, making an image, putting it into Photoshop, manipulating it, printing it, manipulating it, transferring it, working back into the canvas, so that kind of thing, that kind of layering effect through that process. And then now I'm moving more into using plant materials, so anthotypes, transferring images from, making my own pigment, paint, that kind of thing. So trying to be, again, more ecologically friendly.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. While I have you there, let's switch gears a little bit. I'm going to start back on this end with you. It sounds like some of the challenges that you were confronted with painting, for instance, led you down a road to kind of use those limitations to inform a new way of working. So because this exhibition is titled Landscape of Desire, could you talk a little bit about the landscape in which you live, grew up in, work every day? You talked about gardening, how that affects your art practice, either the material in which you use, the subject matter, or just the day-to-day life of an artist. How do those affect your work?
Sure. So, as I said, like starting to use plant material as a paint medium. The other thing is by gardening, and also I studied herbalism with Teresa Boardwine. Some of you may know her from Green Comfort School of Herbal Medicine. So I studied foundations with her, apothecary. She has other herbalists come in. I studied with Matthew Wood as well. And so that really has kind of become my foundation now, is kind of working with the plants in different ways. The last series that I worked on was called Viriditas. It's using the different body systems and the way that the plants affect those body systems within us. So I did all of a series of all of those body systems. But at the same time, I don't know, I feel like my individual work is always a self-portrait. And I guess when we work together, it's more of a family portrait. So that desire, like whether it's this piece Safe or the piece up there called Offering, which is using the plant yarrow, which has an affinity towards blood, so our blood. So you see the blood cells there. You see, that's our daughter Celia, who posed for me. You see the blood kind of coming on her hand, and then the yarrow is the offering. And so it's like this symbiotic relationship, that I feel like we all are missing within the context of landscape and our environment. That we all really need to think, really, it's really important right now that we think about our environment, and like with the piece Safe, of course that was done. It started with her birth. She had birth defect, and how that affected us as a family. And then we became even more cautious about what we were putting, in our home, in our bodies, on our bodies. So all of these things, as far as the landscape, environment, and what our desire is, or what my desire is for health not only of ourselves, but of our environment as well. And it's a critical time right now for everyone to be educated about that. So,
Great. Thank you so
I
much.
think I answered your question.
Yes, yes. How about you, Mark?
I think that was good.
Yeah. She covered it all. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
All right. I like that. Okay, how about you then, Linda? Talk about the landscape a little bit.
Landscape I am so deeply connected to landscape. It is fundamental not only to my artwork, but to my life. And there's two primary landscapes that influence both my life and my artwork. The first, of course, is the landscape that I grew up in. So from age birth to 18-ish, I grew up in Utah and was just surrounded by, I call it like the geological wonderland of America. And my high school was located basically like in very close proximity to, at that time, it was called Kennecott Copper Mine, which is one of I think it's the second largest open pit copper mine in the world. And so, of course, as part of seeing this, at one point I was taken there and like looking down into layers and layers and layers of the Earth's history. And then, of course, you have a lot of fossil life. And then, like, looking out I had to do dish duty when I was young, and I look out the window, the kitchen window, as I was doing dishes, and there's this, the Rocky Mountain, this big blue formation of the Rocky Mountains. And so literally, like, it was a very deep connection, but also like because it's so large, it's so just vast and grand, not only in the physicality of it, the height and the depths, but then also like, because I was very, very interested. I always say that if I wasn't an artist, I was going to be a scientist, because I was so deeply tuned into the way that things look, the structure of nature, the textures of the earth and the lava rocks and spider webs, etc. So I would look very closely at all these different surfaces and become very aware of how, as a child, I didn't realize that was what I was doing, but I was somehow becoming aware of like, well, these deep layers of history, of Earth's history, like, even though they're buried, unless you slice into them, or like the Kennecott copper mine, you blow deep and deep into it, it influences, it's hidden, it's unseen, but it's influencing the way things are, the current iteration of the physical landscape, which very much plays into how I create my artwork, which is very stratified, layered. And a lot of times I call it creative destruction. In order to create the new layer, I have to overlay some other layer. Like even if like this example behind me, like, you know, it's thin superimposed layers of paper. A lot of people think it's ceramic or metal. I started out as a flat piece of paper painting, and it's the size of a table, a large kitchen table. And I do, even though I might ultimately decide to cover up a layer with another strata of paper and pigment, and sometimes I even incorporate actual like seeds and pollen, and you know, that process of building up, it influences the way that ultimately it looks, even though nobody's ever going to see those underlying layers. So that's kind of the influence of that landscape. And then I moved east. I went to Europe, and then I came back, and ultimately I wound up in the east side instead of the west side of our country. And, you know, obviously the west is very dry. Here, all of a sudden, you know, just the trees, the lushness of the green, and it's a very, very different type of landscape. And, you know, instead of millions of years of history, of natural history and earth history, you have hundreds of years in the history of the life of a tree. And again, it's like, and also it makes me tune into more the cycles of history. The life of a tree, it grows and it's constantly changing, not just changing its leaves if it's deciduous, but, you know, a storm comes by and limbs get broken off, you know, or lightning bolt strikes it and opens up a whole hollow inside of it. The tree is constantly being shaped by its environment. And again, it's kind of this like, what it teaches me and how it informs me on a personal level, but also with my art, is that, you know, initially when you, like say you have a favorite tree in your yard, and it's a couple hundred years old, and a lightning storm came, and it initially looks like it destroyed it. But somehow that tree finds a way to grow and to transform, and there's a new beauty that comes through as a result of that initial destruction. So
Okay,
that's
beautiful.
so creative destruction.
Thank you. Oh, that's okay. Lilla, tell us.
Well, I love the question, first of all, because landscape is so important to me on so many levels. So the first obvious level of landscape is the one that we see around us as we walk, drive, experience the world. And we live here in the Shenandoah Valley, in the Piedmont, in such an important place in terms of landscape. And I'm involved in preserving that landscape as well. And I'm really pleased. I'm going to give a little plug in for the Land Trust of Virginia, because Sally Guthrie is here, and she was our executive director, and she's now on the board. And I'm just putting that plug in because I think that protecting our actual landscape is so important. Regarding my work that's here today, that is more about an internal landscape. So I feel like we live in our environment as human beings here on planet Earth, and none of us really, we're all sort of like, wow, what's this about? Inside of ourselves, we have this vast space, like when you think of the landscape from more like a quantum perspective, that everything that we think that we see, we have our human eye vision of it, but there's this other science view that we're coming to understand, which, you know, like in each of our cells, there's a vast amount of space. So I do a lot of work with meditation and accessing the unconscious and things like that. So I was trying in my work here to show the concept of the space we have inside of us. So I like the idea that we have this, you know, you go out in space and there's no end to the vastness of the universe, and that maybe also internally there's something similar inside of us. I will say it's a real challenge to do that using sculpture medium, because, you know, you're using something that is concrete, you know, something that's solid or appearingly solid, and in clay. So I would start these sculptures in clay, built on an armature. Something has to be solid to hold it up, and then the bronze. I'm not going to go to all that. That's not this question, but I'm just saying, like the challenge of trying to find a way to express that. I don't know that I've succeeded yet, but that's something that I'm trying to find a way to express. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. This particular painting that I brought here is part of a series of paintings that came out of a battle I had in my head as a farmer, as a gardener, as somebody who lives in this Shenandoah Valley, who, you know, hikes the Appalachian Trail and things. There's a constant back and forth with plant material and what mankind does to that land, where it's a fierce competition between both. And so I, as watercolor is my medium, I also have a battle of the paint with the paper, because it has a mind of its own mostly, and so it's always a back and forth of trying to rein in certain things. When I grew cut flowers on our farm, I would have everything in nice neat rows and have everything all tidy, and the plants would come up, and then the vine would come, and the deer would come, and the bugs would come, and it was always this back and forth, and I had to learn to respect that. And in my watercolors, when the watercolor takes off in a different direction, then I let it go, and then I come back and bring my, I interject my thoughts back onto that paper, and it's just a constant battle back and forth, very competitive. So anyway, that's my story.
Well, I really relate to everything, what you were saying there about the conflict of the battle for control between nature and people. But how the landscape has influenced me is that I've lived here for about 36 years now in Woodstock, and just being a very visual person, I'm really impacted by the views, the landscape views, and then driving down 81, that wide open vista that you have, it's almost the most dramatic view unless you go up on top of the mountain and look over the valley is of the skies and the amazing power of nature that you witness. And so I got really interested in the awesome, terrible beauty of storm clouds. And actually, for a while, I was really obsessed with tornadoes and thinking that we're going to get a tornado. And I'd see a little spout come down, and my son used to get pretty annoyed with that, I think. But anyway, but then actually moved on from the sky and the power of the weather to more landscape painting, and I started getting fascinated with the what happens to colors in the atmosphere. So, green changes to a less intense green, to a more blue green, to pure blue. And then even with blue, you go from a warm blue to a cool blue, so as it recedes in the distance. And I've gotten really interested in that, in color theory and analyzing the colors in the landscape. But then somewhere along the way, I started noticing these tumbling down, deteriorating barns. So, I never wanted to paint pretty cute pictures of barns in the landscape, but I needed to acknowledge them because the history of them, it indicated us, and also my own ancestry, because we were brought in by the English colonizers to settle this land as Germanic people who were indentured farmers. And we built a lot of these barns. I say we, meaning some of my ancestors. So I started thinking about the power of nature, and these barns now being obsolete are falling down, because if something's obsolete, most people can't invest money to keep them. So the power of nature to reclaim that wood that we as humans took from nature, to reclaim that back into dirt and then regenerate, and then the vines grow over it, and a storm comes and blows it down. So I started thinking more and more about the sublime power of nature through the barns. And now I'm really interested in just how we try to control nature. And just like Peggy said, it's a constant battle. We are trying to control it, and we've often, I think throughout history, have felt we owned it. And so by these textile patterns that I'm using now, these are historic chintz textile patterns that I integrate into the landscapes as sort of a meditation or an exploration on the ways that we try to control nature. So by designing natural imagery-based, stylized imagery of natural forms, I feel like it represents our desire to claim and control and exploit nature. So,
Thank you. Gosh, that's a lot to chew on. I'm gonna start back with you guys, Beth and Mark. This wasn't the question I was going to ask, but now that I'm thinking based on what you guys have discussed, some of you, there's an element of activism that is at the forefront of your work. Some of you it's more subtle than others, but could you talk a little bit about that? Because so much has been spoken about the environment, about dominating the landscape, about how we interact with toxins and whatnot. And could you talk a little bit about if there is an element of activism in your work, and if so, how does it manifest?
Sure. I think that social justice as well as environmental justice is something that's really important to both of us. Mark, maybe his work is more in the social aspect, whereas mine is more in the environmental. And like it's kind of harkening back to what I said before, that with my work, I hope that it would spark that same desire of, being active with, whether it's what you're consuming, what you're purchasing, what you're you know, what's important to you, how you live your life every day. I mean, the choices that we make every day. As an artist, you know, I'm trying to make those choices better, but it's not separate from the way that I live my life every day. I mean, I think our art is a practice of, you know, the everyday life, and that's just an intrinsic part of it. And it's desire. I mean, it's the desire to live in a clean environment, a clean space, to have respect for nature, have respect for each other, which, and we see that a lot of that is kind of diminishing as well, socially. And so all of those things are, you know, at play, whether when someone looks at it, maybe they just see something beautiful. Hopefully, you know, they'll take something else with them as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mark, I know you have something to say this.
Activist. I don't know. I can't guarantee it won't be cynical, but.
Well, working with, say, digital media, there's a low carbon footprint there, I would imagine, unless you're minting NFTs.
Well, this is what my new documentary is about, and
Tell
it
us.
turns out that it's not at all.
Not so much?
No, it's really, really bad, worse than you can imagine. So, if you look at what's going on with the data center industry in Virginia, in Dominion, and just the simple question, where is the power coming from? You start getting some really scary answers, and a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of the area that we all love is in jeopardy just east of us. So that's an issue that everyone can pay attention to, because these complexes, and it's us, it's the internet, and the cloud is on the ground, and it looks like a, you know, I mean, these are millions of square feet that are going in. The biggest data center, I'm just going on this because whatever. The biggest data center complex in the world is scheduled to be built in Prince William County in Haymarket. It's going to turn Haymarket into, this is bigger than what is in Loudoun County, which is currently the largest data center complex in the world. And if you get off and you drive through there, it's really insane to imagine that so close to us. They're planning on building up against Manassas Battlefield. So you'll be able to stand on the battlefield and see a gigantic cement wall of a data center that's humming 24/7. So, you know, everything going online, AI, all the stuff that we see, these commercials, everything's great. Your thermostat, it all has a cost, tremendous cost. So I'm learning about that now, and it's super depressing because I grew up, hey, in the 90s, this is going to save us, the internet. No more paper, and it's
All these trees.
but it's
Now
it's
they're
a
tearing them down to build the centers.
Yeah, and you know, who knows, there may be some kind of breakthrough that makes all this, you know, but it's really depressing right now with the growth rate. And I mean, there are coal burning plants still online that were scheduled to close that are indefinitely online just to power the data center, and still there's nowhere near enough for what's proposed in terms of power. They're talking about more nuclear plants. They have no idea. They're just, because they're building more and more, but not everybody's synced up. The state law says that if you build a facility, Dominion has to provide power by law. So they're getting permission to build them, so they're worried, they'll go to Dominion and sue them for not providing power, you know, so they're just going right straight ahead, and no one knows, you know, it's gonna be wherever we can get it. So it's pretty insane, but it's all for the digital world, you know. So, sorry, you made that comment. I stepped in it.
So how can
It's good.
Yeah, so anyway, with art, concerning art and activism, I think, you know, the thing is that's great about art is that you can do anything in a gallery and it's kind of a safe space. Everything you can imagine is done in a museum show. But that's also the drawback, is that you can do anything because really, is there an effect, right? You know, so it's like, you know that if you did certain things, you know, that's what's the problem, and there's a historical thing of trying to remove art from everyday life, you know, in terms of the white to gallery space, and no offense.
No, I get it.
No, but you know, there's a conversation about all that, and it's really, so I really like artists who bring politics into the gallery and work with that, you know, that it's, or you know, or think people while they're in the gallery think about outside, which I think a lot of the show does, you know, because it has a history of like, you know, we're in a gallery, we don't talk about the world because this is, you know,
Sacred
otherworldly,
space.
ethereal
Right,
space, right, yeah, so, yeah. But, so,
All right, well, thank you. We'll get back to some of that.
As I said earlier, like just my love of the land and of earth and the history of the earth and the living trees and clean air and clean water. This is why my subject matter, the themes are all, so it's a quiet activism, because it's like when you look back, you know, where art took such a radical turn and ugliness became valued. I really had a problem with that, because it was like, if you try to paint, if your intention was to celebrate traditional themes like the landscape and to paint it in a way that is loving and it's beautiful, that it was looked down upon. And even knowing that, I still chose to take that route, to have landscape as my primary theme, and to create my work in such a way that I hope that it connects people to the beauty of the earth, the beauty of the elements, the beauty of light, you know, sunlight hitting form. And I think that as human beings that I think beauty is a spiritual quality, and I think that in counter distinction to what you're saying that's going on, that we have to have as powerful of an answer to that, to get people to remember and to connect. And I think that beauty is the avenue to do that. While I totally am tuned in to what you're saying, it's like, I don't know how to be that voice of more the activist, so to speak. And so I just am kind of trying to, through my own quiet way of creating my work, to connect people to a love of the land, a love of this earth, and through beauty and kind of that spiritual quality of beauty. Hopefully it'll resonate with people and change people's view.
Thank you.
I'm going to answer this in two parts, as I did the last question. So, in the art of my life, I'm an activist in terms of, like, I mentioned the Land Trust of Virginia, which helps people put their land in easement to protect land from development. And I think that's a very important work. And I really appreciate what you said about the data centers. So I'm just going to give you my approval that you went on and on about that. I was really pleased
sorry,
about
I took
that.
up way too
I
much.
would know. I was
You just
really
skipped
pleased
me
about
for the
that.
rest of the.
I was like, everybody, what he said, ditto. And then on a level of art, I'm an art therapist, so I work with people, help us with using art as a medium to help them better understand their world and navigate life's difficulties. And I came to that because I do that for myself, using my art. It's one of the ways that I understand my existence is through, or I try to anyway, through working with tactile medium. And I find it very helpful in terms of just, it helps you know you exist or something. And it also is a great way of understanding yourself more deeply. And in our therapy, I work with people so that, you know, we have the person, there's me, the therapist, and then there's the artwork that they might make, and then that's a third party, so you can take whatever was inside and you put it outside, and that creates a platform to talk about things or to see something that you might not have seen before. Because I think probably all artists do this, whether they're in art therapy or not, that when you create a piece and sometimes you're like, oh wow, I didn't even know I was making that, and it says something back to you, and you experience things differently as a result of having done that. So that's those are my activist things.
I would say that with my art in particular, it's not activist. My life, in some aspects, is in that, I guess if you compartmentalize it and put in two different camps, like Lilla was talking about. My work in architectural and interior design is where I use my active stance in the way we structure our built environments and the materials that we use and the footprint that we place. They're extremely important to me in that aspect. With my art, it's very passive. I use naturally made paints on cotton paper. It's a very simple way of working. I coat them with beeswax when I'm finished. For my art, it's more of a retreat, and it's definitely therapy. I've painted all my life, and I don't know what I would do without it. But it's definitely not where I go for my active advocacy.
All right, thank you, Peggy.
So my work is not really primarily having an activist objective, but I really I think about talking. I want to talk about in my work the concept of hubris, human hubris. Like, we believe that we are the ones in control, and so we're kicking the toe of the giant. And I just, through history, and I'm very interested in human history, and so it's like I want to tell a story because it's interesting to me, this ironic phenomenon that we don't understand what we're doing and we're destroying our own homes. But it's not really I don't think I'm extremely activist in my work, but that's what I think about when I do my work.
I can see that, yeah. All right, I'm going to ask a kind of, loaded question. Could you guys just speak about how you see your work as a spiritual practice? I'm using that as a very broad description, or a grounding process in some way that you've all discussed connection to the earth, life force. Do you see it as a practice of a kind of worship?
Are you going there?
Yeah, how about let's stick with you, Sally.
For me, no, it's not. It's not a worship. It's not very spiritual. For me, it's more expressive. I want to express my feelings and my thoughts, and then physically, it's kinetic. Like when I do the gestural brushstrokes, I'm physically expressive when I'm doing it. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's spiritual. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I don't know.
No wrong answers.
I guess in a broad sense, in that my art definitely connects me to other aspects of my life. It's not spiritual in any woo-woo or religious sense. but it's definitely contemplative where it gives my brain places to go that it wouldn't go otherwise. Yes, that's all I got.
Great. Lilla. Ooh. That's a journey. Well, yes. To me, it's deeply spiritual. But I guess defining what spiritual is, to me, is a very, broad, open concept of what spiritual would mean. I'm not affiliating my work with a particular religion, or I don't consider religion and spiritual to be synonyms. So I feel that whenever we're doing something that is connecting with other people, deeply connecting with other people, deeply trying to understand ourselves, deeply trying to comprehend the universe or the internal workings of our existence. To me, those are spiritual actions. So I feel that it is the deepest of spiritual activities, and it's not always like deep, like let me not just make it sound like it's just so deep and spiritual every minute. I mean, when you're doing artwork, there's just a ton of stuff that you have more time than not. I'm just cleaning up, right? Really, I'm cleaning up. I'm trying to find my stuff. I'm trying to get organized. That's what most of my existence really is. And then, there's these moments where you're like, and I guess those moments are so worthwhile that you're willing to go back and, get all confused again and start all over and try to find your stuff.
Yes, definitely.
So for me, there's kind of like a duality or like a dance between working with the physical materials, the physical processes, but it also is especially in the inspiration stage, or that connecting with nature, which is my subject matter. And at that moment, it's like this sacred communion and an attunement to the elemental creative energies. Again, it's not akin to a religion at all. It goes beyond religion. It is the life force from which we all come from. And it's like, again, that element of beauty, like when you see like the light of the sunset or the glint from, the late afternoon sun coming through a woodland as it hits the leaves and that sparkle. It's like that interaction between the non-material but very real elemental energies, which physics gets into that, and metaphysics, and the physical form and physical world. And that's what we are. We're kind of like this combination of the two. And so my whole way of creating is working with both of that. The physicality, and I love working, like I said, becoming increasingly more sculptural or dimensional in the way that I work, even if it's a painting. And all the while, it's kind of like when you think about like the, elements of compositional design, when I was teaching drawing or painting, one of the first things you try to teach students is that, the positive and negative space. So now it's taking it into the real world. So you teach them that, like, when you're looking at an object, you're focusing on the positive shapes. But then just as important is the surrounding space between, which is the negative space. Well, that's again that duality. It's like you have to have, it's an interesting composition when the artist is aware of and purposely arranges both the positive and the negative, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. Mark, how about you?
No one ever accused me of being spiritual. You know, it's a hard one. It really is. You know, working with nature, natural materials, and I mean, there is some sort of real, something I guess you can tap into that's profound. But it's something that we often just work against, and you know, the cycles of nature, birth, death, you know, the nutrient cycle, you know, going from the creation of energy, carbohydrates from the sun, and it's completely magical. I think all that stuff is, to me, spiritual. Like, it's, you know, scientists can explain it all, there's a process. It doesn't say that it's not this kind of magical thing, even though it's explained, you know? I think what we want out of spirituality is often ego-driven. I want to continue, I want to be with the ones I love forever. But I also have this like love, but also hate for this idea that maybe just what we're supposed to do is be eaten by worms, go back to the soil, and that's enough, really. But you know, you have to get like a license and a special burial permit to not be embalmed, to
Right,
you know,
right.
last moment on Earth to introduce this great toxic mess into the world. It's just amazing. So, so yeah, there's something, but at the same time, I'm well aware that every time spiritual is sort of raised, if you look up the most enlightened artists of the last 500 years, 99.9% are white men. They just happen to be tapped into that spiritual like no one else is, right? So the spiritual is also political, always when it gets on an institutional level, when people start celebrating it. And so I think on a level of an individual artist working, it's quite different than when you get into canonizing people, and you know, because then you're sort of picking each, you know, the kind of, oh, this is the spirituality that we're going to look at, and these are the people who say it, and must be the only story, you know. So I think it's tricky because spiritualism, like religion, has been used to cover ideology for so long, you know. So it's hard to talk about, I think.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
So, yeah, whenever I get spiritual, Mark always brings me back.
The other worm talk.
But when I escape and, you know, into my own realm, then yes, it is very spiritual. Yes, I don't get that as often as I need to, but.
We've tried lots of churches, we'll put it that way.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's probably some more. You can start your own.
I mean, right now, which Mark, I'm bringing him with me on this journey, but it's a bit of a pilgrimage. So when we were in Darmstadt, one of the other artists at the International Art Center, he gave us a book, and it was on Hildegard von Bingen. And since that book, my life has changed. I mean, because I just have fallen in love with her, and there's definitely a spirituality there to be connected with a nun from the 12th century through her art, through her music, and you know, she is definitely my impetus for what I'm doing with you know, even the herbs. She was into medicinal herbs as well. So there's just definitely a spiritual connection there, and yeah, so I'm bringing work on a pilgrimage there.
Great.
In the fall, and we're even going to stay at an abbey.
Ooh, nice.
You can tell he's excited about that. So.
Nice. Okay, great. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about technology. I knew I was going to ask you a little bit about how you feel about technology in your work. How has it influenced your work? What are your thoughts about the horizons of how technology has infiltrated everything? But most importantly, how it informs your work and your practice.
Sure. Well, you know, as Mark said, he's working on this documentary now on the data centers, and so I'm learning about all of that as well. But I do like, as I said before, I like to bring images into the computer, because then you can bring, images of cells, the science, into that. But as far as like AI, I don't know if you're speaking.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
That's a little frightening to me. Just the idea of the level of, being a creative and feeling like, especially like with our daughter, like it was really important, whatever field she goes into, she's in biology now, but for her to be a creative person. Because without that creativity, then, life is going to be very different. And to depend on the computer for AI to tell us everything from, how to make a recipe to, because we can't use our own brain to figure out when we look in our refrigerator how to be creative just to, make dinner. But yeah, all of these things, the celebration of AI is a little daunting, and I'm confused by it. I'm not really sure why people are so excited about it.
Yeah, we saw an ad last night. There was a guy in the garden with a plant, and he said, and he's asking the AI, what if I bought a plant but there's not enough sun? And you just think that AI is going to go, you shall have sun, what are you talking I think they can fit it on a seed package. You don't need, satellites, data centers, traveling across the world 3 or 4 times to ask this question. So yeah. And I think there's a kind of purism in art, which I faced a lot, right? Going into technology and media, from painting, and programs were all very based in, analog. So I know that, and I'm not a purist about it, obviously. But I feel like things are getting to the level in terms of what Beth was saying about creativity, and it's no longer about a tool. I admit I have my class read Karl Marx. He wrote an essay in the 19th century about it's in commonly in a lot of new media and techno culture texts. And it's one of the first discussions of machines on the job, and basically it's incredibly dense. Incredibly dense writing. But basically what he's saying is, are you going to use the tool? On every job, are you using the tool, or is the tool using you? Yeah. And his assessment of industrialization was that the tools are using the people, right? And this is the whole problem, right? And so I think about that with AI on this unprecedented level. We have the tools using us. And we think we're in charge, right? Like we're online and we think we're actively going to websites. And most of that's completely passive, gathering data, which is one of the biggest commodities on the planet now, to sell, to track, to sell. And it's this tremendous thing that somehow we feel like we have so much agency, and because technology is sold on freedom and escape, and it's really too bad because, the days of when the internet was supposed to be this thing, and it was for a while, you could get on and meet people from around the world. It wasn't throwing stuff at you left and right, and but the social media phenomenon and big data has really, and the art side of that with AI is that it's really taking over, I think, creativity in a really fundamental sense. I mean, people said that about the electric guitar. You no longer have to struggle to play, But it's a fundamentally different thing. They're hiring people now as engineers. They're called prompt engineers, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
They just know how to come up with the question for the AI to answer, right? So that's a level removed entirely from, right? That's, and we kind of all become that, just Googling. We all have become very proficient at sort of the right combination of things to trigger the right. So yeah, I think it's a little scary. I for the first time last year, I got and it may have been coming in before this, but it's the first time I noticed that I was getting papers, AI written papers, ChatGPT.
Oh, as a teacher, as a professor.
And there's no way to check with 100% certainty. There are track like software that, but it's not certain, right? Because it could. So, but I've had them, and I couldn't prove it. You can't. It's so difficult to prove absolutely because it's so well. It's so you can actually humanize it. You can have the AI write it, and you can say make some
Dumb it down a
mistakes.
little. Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So, but in that process, they're not learning anything. So I have to increasingly come up with questions that there's no way they could ask, right? Watch this video, read this thing that you can't find on the web that I scanned in a PDF, and then do this, and then put it all together and tell me, come up with it, so I think it helps them become more creative in the end, but it's really hard, because eventually it'll catch up and they'll be able to do all that too, so it's, yeah. But from an industry perspective, they're just, like AI's copying people's voices, in the entertainment industry. There's a whole part of this which has been there from the beginning, going back to the essay, which is that, like, wouldn't it be great if we could just fabricate people, because, even including actors, and then we don't have to mess with them and deal with them not coming out of their trailers and stuff, so.
And demanding green internet.
Yeah.
On any given day, I go several different directions. Well, since knowing that this was one of the questions.
This is our last question, by the way, just so you have a sense of where we're at.
There's like a couple different directions I can go, but primarily it's not something that I am going to use in my own creative work. As far as I go, I don't even use Photoshop. I use photography to help me to see quicker. Because I like to actually be in the environment and to respond to it. But again, because I'm painting light and transitional changes, that something can change in a couple minutes. So I use photography both to see it and to see things from different perspectives, and to capture those sudden shifts in the environment and light. So that's probably as far as technology is that my artwork will tap into. But kind of like thinking about listening to what you're saying, I definitely feel that way too, and I feel that for some reason, like people in a general sense are wanting to replace ourselves. It seems like we're trying to create a facsimile of our own intelligence, a facsimile of our creativity, a facsimile of every aspect of what it is to be human. And we're so afraid of our physicality that we're willing to give up everything that it is to be a human being, to feel, to experience, to grow, to change, all for this convenience, because that's how it's being sold to us. Look at all the cool little things that you can do with this. But what do we lose in the end if we give ourselves, our humanness, over to this? I think we lose far more than we.
As we walk, drive, experience the world. And we live here in the Shenandoah Valley, in the Piedmont, in such an important place in terms of landscape. And I'm involved in preserving that landscape as well. And I'm really pleased. I'm going to give a little plug in for the Land Trust of Virginia, because Sally Guthrie is here, and she was our executive director, and she's now on the board. And I'm just putting that plug in because
Be human and be our very human selves, and also not, and to be an artist and not, all artists are using materials that, unless you're just using leaves, which I think is great. Maybe I'll go that direction someday. Technology concerning AI and all of these things that are existing, but still sort of not quite in my reach, as I'm not a techie person, I'm still struggling with how to
figure out how to find my chat GPT or whatever. I think that on a guilty side, you know, I've always wished there could be another one of me, you know, I'm like, God, if there could just be two of me, think of all the things I could get done, or, you know, I'll be like, I can't remember this, that, or the other thing, so I love the idea that I can just look it up. There's super conveniences that are really, really, you know, they're there, or they, you know, they're a temptation. And Instagram and social media and all of that, which I do use and I do find addictive, and we know it is addictive, and it was designed to be addictive. And you know, it's important to know that it was actually designed to suck us in, and it wasn't really designed for us. It was designed to use us, and it does. And how to strike that balance in the world, I'm struggling with that. So I think it's a really important question. I think we should all ask ourselves these questions pretty routinely. I do think it's here, and I have to figure out how to live in the world with the world as it is, and I can't change. I mean, I can make my small changes, but I can't, you know, really change the outcome. So you have to figure out how to live in the world with what's happening now. And some of it's wonderful, and some of it will be wonderful, and some of it will be horrible, and just the way it's always been.
Now, with everything being on a screen, there's a big disconnect between humanity and their built environments. They might think about trying to be environmentally sound, but they're not thinking about how they're living and breathing and communicating within these spaces, because they're pulling stuff off the internet and learning about every little doodad out there and wanting to put it in their spaces without thinking about how it's going to live with them in their lives. And my communication with clients is very difficult between the screen and what is actually going to be the big space, because there's just a real strong disconnect without having feet on the ground in the space. It's difficult for me, big time, in my architecture world. I find it very frustrating. I think there's younger people who find it very freeing. I do not. I think there's a big loss of a sense of place, a big loss of how they live in their environment with technology. But so anyway, I spend a lot of time on the screen. So then the second half of my day is with my art, and I pull back and I work with handmade everything.
So I'm going to make this short and sweet. So I have brought technology into the last, well, it's not the last step, it's the newest aspect of my work, which is I digitally source the textile patterns from museums, from museum collections that I find on their websites. And so I download them onto my computer and translate it into a black and white image, and then I upload that into my die cutting machine, and machine cuts out the stencil. So I actually, though, realized that that represents one of the 3 or 4 historic time periods that I include into my work. So that represents modern day, like the Anthropocene, which is, you know, the age of humans. So yeah, that's how technology comes into my work.
It's interesting, because it looks so organic, right?
Yeah.
But you would never know that. It's interesting. Great, thank you guys. I'm going to open this up to questions. You've heard a lot. There's a lot to digest.
Artistic people. You know,
Support the art world, support gallery shows, show up to them, go find them, support people that want to do, just like Becca and Woodstock, you know,
But
enriches people's lives.
Yeah. For sure. I think what you're talking about is like real face-to-face.
Yes.
Yeah. Not a party, but,
6 o'clock.
yeah, not a website, not a chat room.
Yeah.
Like
Maybe
this,
you can bring in
yeah.
a piece of art and share it and talk about
Yeah,
it.
sort of a critique, site, yeah, like a situation. Yeah,
Because
because,
when I see everybody's art, it's fascinating, and you know there's stories, layers of story of how you got there. For instance, Beth and Mark's piece, the video piece, it's the only one in the show. It's like, what is that imagery? It's just mesmerizing. It looks kind of erotic, and it looks like medical, and I'm sure it's something super interesting. I'd like to know more. And it's like, okay, how do we do that?
yeah, something to think about, you know.
Yeah, so.
Living out here, we often are living in a bubble, and we're pretty isolated from the urban arts community and from buyers and collectors and
Each other.
each other and,
yeah.
and students and whoever. And so these moments are pretty rare, I think, for us out here.
Yeah, since I have the mic. I mean, I've always been struck by how the visual arts is really not mainstream. I mean, maybe in like manga or, I don't know if I can think of other tattoo art, it's mainstream, but like other forms of art have more, there's more interest in the general public in it. And I don't really know why. Maybe, I think I do know why. I think it became too intellectual. It became an academic study, and it all became about theories, and nobody, you know, when there's just a square white blank canvas, and that's in the museum, and nobody can really get anything from that unless you know the whole history of art, of where that artist, you know, built on people minimalizing things down further and further. Anyway, it just left the general public. And I think that's why we don't really have this available to people. You know, it would be good to have more discussions like this. I agree.
Yeah, let's do it. Joe, when are you going to leave the next one?
Well, actually, down Kid Lane, I just finished a space, 2,000 square feet, and we could have meetings, we could have artist anonymous there.
All right. Yes, sounds good. All right, any other questions? No?
I have a small one. Sally, do you commute from Woodstock to the torpedo factory daily?
Well, no. We do have to spend 28 hours a week on average in the studio open to the public. So the only way we realized that we could do that, and thankfully it was something that we could do it. You know, our stage in life is to purchase a second home there, but I rent it out as an Airbnb
Nice.
to try to, with the scheme to try to make it pay for itself. And that's how I do it.
Excellent.
Make it work. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
We can think creatively.
Yes.
All right, guys. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. This is the 5th talk of 6. So next week is our 6th and final art talk of this series in conjunction with this exhibition. But we hope to have more. And so if you are interested in finding out more about what might be going on here in the future, please leave your email if I don't already have it. I have a newsletter. I'll send out information periodically about goings-on. So thank you again for being here. And thank you, artists, for sharing so generously and enlightening us.
Thank you.